and then we'll have a little question and answer period afterwards. So here we go. First of all, the first thing that you're going to see here is one of our trips that we're running. This is almost full, by the way. So we have a few spots left for Portugal, and we have a few spots left, maybe a few spots left for southern Spain. That's going to be here in this April, okay? But we are going to be going to we're going to Norway in July. We're going to be right there. That's the time all right. So to give you an idea of the we're on one of these the most beautiful fjords that you can be on. We're going to stay in those little red cabins. So just so you know, all right. And then and the price, you can take a look at the price. Now this is a 10-day price, but Norway's more expensive than any southern Spain for sure. All right, but it's worth it. Okay, and I think that if you want to join us, we're right now people are signing up, and there is a pre-tour. The pre-tour is to take a trip around a number of these areas that you wouldn't be able. You know, we're going to stay in pretty well one place to paint because that's all we need to do. All right, but I think there is a pre-tour that if you decide you want to do that, and this is all through tiernotours.com. Okay, and you can always get in touch with us. You can go to our website, yellowbarnstudio.com, and you can see that. And then in July or in September, the 2nd through the 11th, we're in the Dolomites. We're in the Italian Alps. We're going to be painting in the area where Sargent painted the town. Okay, and we've been there before, so I cannot wait to go back. Just to tell you. So when you get up in the Alps in September, it's a kind of a really interesting experience because you're right on where it's starting to snow, you know, and it can be chilly, but it also can be 60 degrees. All right. So I think that's one of the things. Classes I'm teaching this coming winter, I teach throughout the year. Somebody asked me if I retire. I can't retire. I don't know why. All right. It's just too much fun. All right. So anyhow, these are the classes that are listed out there, but you can also go on our website. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now to talk about this show. This show, the importance of this show is that each year I try to produce a body of work. I do have a gallery in Shepherdstown that handles the work. Okay. And I think the thing is with that, you know, whatever she doesn't sell during the year, then I bring down here at the end of the year, and then we have the show. So obviously she has a small gallery, but I do quite well here each year. And we had a great opening last night, sold a lot of work, and there's still a lot of work available right now at really very reasonable prices. So I want you to know that, okay? And then my philosophy, all right? First of all, Jackson Pollock said, every great artist paints what he or she is. And I think that one of the things that's real important for anybody who's a painter is to understand that your work are your thoughts. And that's how I look at mine. And the uniqueness is to make work that I think has the power to touch others. All right. I think that's one of the most important things about sharing work, that it needs to be seen. All right. But my response is to nature. And I'm an outdoors person. So if you want me to paint, I'd rather be outdoors than indoors any day. All right. And do I work from photos? Very seldom. I might work just for a reference, but truthfully, I use my memory and I use my way of seeing what's in my mind's eye, and I paint from my head. So one of the things that I can tell you is I feel like I have a photographic memory because I can see whenever I'm painting out there what I can see on my canvas. So I think that's one of the things that I would tell you really want to learn how to develop if you're going to be a really strong painter, is the ability to use that memory. Okay. And the photo is not going to teach you that. As a matter of fact, just keep in mind that when you copy a photo, your eyes go like this. All right. When you're out looking in the landscape, your eyes are like this. You understand? So I think that you have to recognize what that does to your brain. All right. And I think that this is one of the things for me. I'm drawn to just being out in the landscape trying to make my idea. All right. But one of the things I'm going to tell you is using paint as the medium to paint the music. And I'll tell you that that's the key for me as an artist, is to paint the music. Okay. I feel every painting has a piece of music to it. And so whenever I paint these, I can hear them. All right. And I think that's the other thing. I'm also drawn to the vibration of the light. The light is something that when we talk in terms of music and we talk in terms of what we call good vibrations, all right, that's the same thing with painting. Color vibrates and it's internalized and it can create energy. It can take all your pain away. If you're honestly, I will tell you, I've had many times where I felt like I didn't feel good. As soon as I put that paint in my hand, it was like medicine. All right. So I would recommend that. These are different places. As I mentioned, I like to paint the light. So, these are Rehoboth right now. And, sometimes it's about painting, quote, somewhat realistically. All right. In that I have the ability to go after the accurate mixing of color, drawing well, things like that. But at the same time, there's something that's got to go beyond that. And I think that the appeal is in the way the colors work and the kind of vibration that you make. So, and all of these paintings, by the way, are here right now. So what is painting? I see it as a record of my thoughts. That's the key. All right. And I want you to understand that painting is like silent poetry. This is what Plutarch said. And poetry is like painting that speaks. All right. So you start to understand that somebody came and looked at my work one time and she said, I paint prose and you paint poetry. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to get to the essence. I try to understand the simplicity and I try to understand major relationships. Okay. But every painting is a piece of music from my point of view. And the other thing about painting, keep in mind that all the art forms, when you read a book or you listen to a piece of music or you watch a dance, you have to have memory. But with this, the memory is right there. Everything is there all at once, the beginning and the end. And I think that when you start to recognize that as an art form, all right, it's unique. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing is painting is just another way of keeping a diary. I totally agree with that. These are my, where I've been. This is my path on this earth, and the places that I visited and how they spoke to me. And I think that when I'm drawing to a piece of work, or making a painting from a certain spot, there's something there that attracts me, and I want to know kind of what it is. So I think that that's one of the most important things in making a painting. And then the other thing is there's something that goes beyond. And this is one of the things that Plato, I don't know if you realize something about Plato, but Plato didn't like art. All right. Mathematics was much better than painting, because mathematics was much more cerebral, whereas he thought that artists, all they did was copy. That was his take on it, that it wasn't as important as what we think. But keep in mind that when us as artists, we have got to go a little bit beyond just what it looks like. All right, it's got to have something beyond that. And I think I call it the essence, and I kind of look for that in my work. All right, so that's an elusive thing. It's one of the things that I'll tell you about making a painting is it's like building a house. So you really have to think in terms of the way you're structuring it. And I think that the key to that is just recognizing what the relationships are and building an idea around them. So there are a couple paintings here, the cows that are down here on the right, and there's the chairs over here on the left that are left at a certain stage. All right. And I honestly, I can see them going to another stage, but then that makes them a different painting. And at that point, I want to make a decision whether I want to go beyond that, or do I just want to hold it at that stage. You make those decisions, okay? But the key to this, as what Monet said, is the painting should be able to be stopped at any stage. So whenever I'm working, it is about doing that. Believe me, it's not about taking something to a point where I have an idea. I never have an idea. It just emerges. All right. So and this particular painting, I can tell you, I just did this about a week ago up in Washington Grove, and I will tell you that I struggled, really struggled. All right, and I had to. Shoshana was with me, so we were all struggling out there. It was amazing. How do you capture something so amazing, right? Is the challenge, but it all comes down to designing. And so when you look at like the blue that's in this painting up here, that sky, I kept putting the sky in and until it worked. So it was like not trying to capture what I was seeing up there, but putting in the blue in relationship to the colors to create a balance and a focus. All right. So that's the blues that you see in that painting. Some of them were there, but some of them were not. It's all about design. All right. And this is one of the other things that you need to recognize about making paintings is the key to all painting is design. Okay? So it's how you design. Okay. All right. So anyhow, so the keys to making a good painting. All right. I will say this, think it and you will see it. So it's up here. All right. And then feel it. What does it feel like? Now I'm going to ask you a question. Whenever you go around and look at these paintings, if you can taste the color, can you taste it? Because I know what yellow tastes like. I know what red tastes like. I know what green tastes like. Do you know what green tastes like? All right. This is what you need to understand. You need to understand that it's more than just seeing. It's even smelling it. You need to be able to use your senses, all right, to take you to another level. So that idea of feeling it is important. And then you build your idea on that. You understand that I'm not building my idea so much on the picture, but I'm building my idea on the smell or the music or the taste. All right, which is an element that I think you have to, you have to recognize. All right. You can tell when something tastes sweet and when it tastes bitter. All right. That's the thing. All right. And so the other thing that I look for in painting that is so important about solving any painting is just repeating patterns. And this particular painting, which is over here, I had it in a show a year ago and had a different foreground. The foreground didn't work. All right. I knew it when I put it in the show, but I thought, well, maybe somebody will see it a little differently than I am. All right. But so the nature of that was, okay, how do I build that foreground? Well, we're going to tell you something. The purples weren't there. You understand? In other words, I probably could have seen them if I was out on location and said, do you see purple? By the way, that's the other way of seeing color, is just to ask yourself if you see colors. All right. So you should, when you're out painting, ask yourself every color. Do I see yellow? Do I see orange? Do I see blue? Do I see purple? If you say that, you will see them. All right. So that's the other aspect of working with color. But the patterns are the key, and the balance is the key. And I think that what you're trying to do when you're making a painting is create a sense of harmony. All right, that where the painting feels natural. And I think that that's not necessarily that it looks natural, it feels natural. I think that's the difference in the way I work. Okay. So there are 9 things that I think about when I'm making paintings. First thing I think about is emotion, always. What's the emotion I'm experiencing? All right. And then the elements that I think you build an idea around are what we call description. Those are things that we will identify either by feeling or by words. Okay. And the more we can call something a word, the more we see it as an object. All right. So I think that there are times you're going to say, well, why do you paint so many sunsets? The reason I paint sunsets particularly is because they tend to be closer to being abstract for me in the way I think. Whereas if I'm painting in the middle of the day, it's much more representational. All right. So when I'm talking about the two paintings, the chairs and the cows, I have to make a decision what I want, how much do I want to paint a cow so that you call it a cow? All right, because I can take it to the point where you can count the spots and everything on it, or can I just, you know, communicate it, all right, with a touch of the brushstroke. I think this is one of the things that's really important in recognizing, the way you're describing something. And I don't know if you know Edwin Dickinson's work, but Dickinson was an artist that he wanted to paint a tree just to the point that you didn't call it a tree. As soon as your mind called it a tree, he went past that point. All right. And I think that the idea is to suggest an idea of a tree, but not to call it a tree. Okay. So are we calling this a boat? Hopefully it's more than a boat. That's what I'm after. All right. So the other thing is what I'm looking for when I'm making a painting is how expressive is it? And you're going to see that when I work with paint, I work with thick and thin paint. All right. Very much like Rembrandt. That was what Rembrandt was known for in his work, was really using impasto. And so you'll see me orchestrating the way I build the idea based upon the solid moments of paint. What is that usually? That's usually the lights. The lights are usually solid, more solid than the dark side. All right. And here you see that. And then the tactile property is really important for me. All right. So I want a surface that doesn't look like a photograph. All right, which means that it's flat. All right, which most photographs show me one that isn't. All right. And I think that the kind of thing that we're talking about then is that sculptural property. So I like to sculpt with paint. All right. I believe that's where you get expression and emotion. So I really try to do that. I try to take an object like that boat and make it go beyond just the boat. All right. And maybe you can feel the surface of it or whatever. All right. Then the elements, every one of these paintings has a certain psychological idea behind this, whether it's being lonely or perhaps maybe certain elements in the painting are, where they're restful, okay? Or in the case of something that has a storm or tension or strong light, all right? There are paintings in this room that were painted during a hurricane, all right? So you'll get an idea of what they were. That one came after a hurricane. That was down in Rehoboth, and there's a little small one way in the back on the floor that it's called Slicker, which was painted in the hurricane in Rehoboth. All right, because I used to have to do those workshops down there, and every so often there would be a hurricane. You think I would cancel the workshop? Absolutely not. All right. So anyhow, because I love nature, I love being in all the things, but it does bring about the psychological aspect. And then every one of these paintings has a certain sense of identity to symbolism. All right. And I will tell you that, like, for instance, there's a couple buildings of houses. I always tell my classes when I'm talking about architecture that you're not looking at a building, you're looking at a womb. We go back to the womb every night. All right. And I think that you start to realize the symbols of what boats mean, or what roads mean, or even what cows mean. All right, because they have certain kinds of elements to them. Like, for instance, the Holsteins, for me, when I would paint them for years, never make the connection that they look like clouds. Once I made the connection that they look like clouds, I was able to understand the Holstein. So I think that's the important thing as well. And then atmosphere. Every one of these deals with some kind of sense of heat or coolness or atmospheric depth, things like that. And of course, the space. And then theory. The theory is what I will tell you this. Every painting sits in the studio And it's funny, but I'll be painting away on one and touching another. All right. And I think that this is one of the things that happens, especially before the shows. You'd be surprised. I went and revisited every one of these paintings. So what do I judge a painting on? All right. First of all, it's the emotion. But then, and if I was a judge judging a show, I would be judging my own work this way. All right. I want the idea. I want an interesting idea. I want one that's inventive. And I understand that most of the ideas that I'm painting have been painted before. All right. So how do I paint them in a way that's unique to me? And that's the authenticity. And then, you know, I am always looking to see what I learned from a painting. And people ask me, well, which one's your favorite? I don't have a favorite. Every one of these is a learning experience. All right. And I can tell you that if you are able to kind of come close to solving them, I think that's one of the biggest things. All right. So composition, drama, simplicity. I try to make things simple. If I was to say, is this show simple? No, it's not. All right. There are some paintings that are, but if I was to categorize what I could I simplify things even more? Yeah, I could. All right. And then the essentials. I only like to paint the essentials. I learned that when I was giving a lecture one time. And the lecture was, why should I tell everybody everything when they only know what I tell them? So your paintings only tell the viewer what you tell them. That's the key. All right. So you don't have to tell them everything. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes beginning painters have a problem with. They need to do everything. All right. It's not that way. So just keep in mind how that works. And elements of a good painting, you got to understand the elements of design: line, shape, color, value. All right. The rhythm, the texture. All right. The space. Those are elements of design, and you need to recognize those. You also need to recognize that you're trying to make a painting fit a rectangle. So I think that when we look at these paintings, I want them to feel like they feel like they should be on that rectangle. That's hard to do. All right. So just keep that in mind. And then I always ask myself what dominates, because what I'm going to build my idea around is what my focus is. And I will tell you that I don't do it so much by with my mind telling me what dominates. I let my eyes tell me what dominates, because the mind takes what the eye does. The eye picks up information and then sends it back to the brain. The key for you all to be really good at this is to get your minds to see more. All right. And that's the key. So you got to be careful, because the mind will control how you interpret things. And you have to understand that whenever I'm talking this way, the first thing I do is squint. I squint to understand what I'm really seeing as far as the most important elements are. And squinting will do that. Perspective is important to me. All right. Building depth. And I use a lot of perspective. So you'll see that through the paintings. I just gave a lecture to one of my classes last week. They don't use perspective hardly at all, or they understand perspective. So I wanted them to understand that. And then the key to my paintings, all of them have to be that they feel like they're fresh. All right. And if they feel stale, then they're not there. Okay. So they have to have a certain freshness. And then I understand the techniques and that I can employ. And the last thing is the narrative. Narrative is underlying all of these, but it's more of a psychological narrative. And so for me, it isn't always that you can express it in words. It's got to be expressed in feeling. And I think that that's what I would tell you is important about painting. So here's a womb. All right. A good painting is comparable to good cooking. All right. Even a good cooking recipe demands tasting, repeated tasting, and that. I worked on that painting before I brought it. Okay. There's a number of things that I simplified or changed. Okay. And I built it on what I thought was important. So now we talked about Plato. Aristotle said the aim of art is not to represent the outward appearance. He said of things, but their inward significance. I firmly believe that. And that's the only argument that's going to defeat Plato. All right. Is that it has to go beyond the outer appearance. All right. And I think that you have to be able to take that and build on it. And your ability to recognize elements, I think, not only the elements of design, but the elements of emotion. So now, every one of these paintings, when I'm out there, I say, you know, I have the same colors Monet has. So, you know, I realize that if I have the same colors as Monet, I should be able to paint like Monet, all right, or better. And so that's my challenge. So these are all elevated colors, of course, and then understanding, this is off, but understanding your palette. This is a painting that's out there that I want you to understand. If you go out and look at that painting, you'll be surprised to understand that that painting was painted with white, black, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and Naples yellow, and that's all. And when you look at that painting and you go into here, you'll see that I have 17 colors on my palette, but that painting has just 5. All right. And I think that you start to realize that you need to understand your palette. Can you work from a limited palette, or can you work from a really large palette of color? Well, one of the things that I know with Monet was that when a piece of blue came on the market, he ran out and he bought it. All right. And we have these colors now. So when you go to the art store, you can't pass them up. But there are some that are more important for me than others. And a number of them that I'll just share with you is Alizarin Yellow, Alizarin Yellow by Williamsburg, Brilliant Pink by Holbein, Radiant Turquoise and Radiant Magenta by Gamblin, okay, and Cadmium Green Light by Holbein. And then there's a color by William Harding, which is called Phthalo Blue Titanium White. All right. These are colors that I won't take off my palette. All right. So if anything, do I use a lot of bright colors? Well, I will. And sometimes I'll paint just right out of the tube. All right. Somebody asked me one day, they said, I need to learn how to mix color. And I said, we're not mixing color. We're painting it right out of the tube. All right. And that worked as well as mixing. Now, there are paintings in here that are always a challenge. And I challenge myself with every painting, but I'm going to tell you, painting can humble even the best. And well, you have one over there, which is these horses. I've been painting these horses now. I painted cows for quite a while, but I started painting horses. I got to get out of the fact that I got to understand that they're not cows. All right, that's the thing. All right, but they're my challenge right now. All right, so I'm challenging myself by facing it and trying to make ideas. So you are challenged to make an idea and value a good painting because you know how hard they are to make. So you're seeing the ones that I feel are good enough to put out here. But believe me, come to my studio, you're going to see them all over the floor. All right. So this is it. And this was in the Cotswolds. And I was really inspired by taking a long canvas and really going after something that was unique. And there was a cloud in the sky that was just perfect for that canvas. I used my memory, the snow paintings, not the one on the left, the one on the left, they're both from the same place. But the one on the right, I just worked on and elevated the color on the on that one tree trunk in the front. And you're going to say, well, how did you elevate the color? I saw it in my mind. I saw that tree in my mind. Do you understand? So that's how I could paint it that way. And I think that I feel that that's the way you want to do things. As with this one, this was one that I did in Monhegan. It worked, but it didn't work. So I kept playing with it, and I made it atmospheric. And my wife came into the studio and said, I like that. My wife says she likes it, then it works. All right. So that's the way I go. Stages of making a painting, understanding why you choose a subject. That's what this was about. All right. How do you pick up information? That's how I build an idea. So I ask myself, how am I going to see this? All right. And then I structure it. and then I analyze it, and then I kind of evaluate it, and then I test it on my wife. All right. So this is how it works. But that's how that painting started. Surprise?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what the fight's about. All right. I know what it is and what it isn't. They're gonna say, well, what happened to the tree? The tree had leaves on it. Yeah, I went there when it did have leaves, and I painted it with leaves. And then I went back when it was colder and there were no leaves. All right. So I will revisit a spot many times with a painting. And this one I took back, this was over a year uh, difference. And I finished this one just recently uh, with a group that paints with me. But it's interesting. Oops, let's see. It's interesting that there were elements in the painting that I liked, but there were elements that I wasn't so sure about. Now, one of the things I can do is I can draw in here, and I'm going to do something really quickly.
Well,
Yes.
are you you went back to the scene itself?
Yeah. Yeah. I went back to the scene. Last thing I put in was this right here. And it was there. All right. And I wasn't sure if I hadn't noticed it before, but I noticed it after I got the painting to a certain stage. But one of the things that's real important about understanding anything that you do is the foreground. And the foreground is really important, how you start. And a lot of people that are painters, they start with the background. I don't paint the background first. I paint the foreground first. And I lead my eye through that foreground. And I'm going to pick up on where my eye goes. So when I'm painting a painting, I get to know what that painting visually is about. And eventually, of course, the light is changing, but you can see the kind of ways that I might use just certain points to get your eye to move through the painting. All right. And there is an eye level to your when you're looking at something. So you really have got to be understand that. And of course, you're going to be looking down, or you could be looking up. Do you want to do that? Well, you don't want to distract too much from what you're doing. So I think that that's one of the things that just to keep in mind. But a lot of this is how your eye is moving, and I think that that's the key. All right. Now, the thing is, take another look at that one just so you see the difference. All right. There's a lot of difference. You know, I think this is it. I mean, just keep in mind that this is building paint, you know. And so what do I look for? The freshest painting I have in this show is down there on the floor. I was going to hang it, but we didn't have any room. But the thing is, I had this painting sitting in the studio for 3 or 4 years. This is in Rehoboth, and it's a sunset. And I just tried to make it as fast as I could. And I didn't know whether I liked this painting or not, but I didn't trash it, and I didn't paint over it. And it's been sitting in my studio to the point where I just got so interested in it that I put it in the show. I actually got to like it. All right. Choosing your subject, what appeals to you? What's its scale? What's its color? What's its shape? What's its history? All right. Those are the things that I look for. And, you know, I'll be drawn to things, and especially like painting things more than once. This is real important. I highly recommend that you paint things more than once. And this is that marsh in Rehoboth when I do the workshops there. Now, what's fascinating is you see that painting that's up there? This is a painting that I did after it. Okay. And it looks like this. And I want you to understand something. The Luminists did very complex paintings like that. And they actually went back and did studies afterwards, not before. It's funny, but you would think that you would do the study before. No, the study comes after. And that's what you don't recognize. All right. And so you need to be able to take a perspective. You have to have an open mind, and you have to kind of reason with things. All right. But really, truthfully, my idea behind this was that I really wanted to make that simple, and I wanted to make it abstract. All right. And so I decided to paint it that way. All right, so this is it. And this was on a square canvas, of course. And here the same way. This chair down here, when I was painting it, last July. I paint these chairs, by the way, often because they're kind of a signature, all right, of dealing with something that's really psychological. And that is that every time I look at these chairs, I see somebody sitting in them. All right. So they have that kind of comfortable quality. But I started this painting on the left and I had all these people come by and respond. And like, don't do any more. It was like, I'm listening to like 5 people come by. If a painting can get anybody to even talk about it, that's pretty good. If they said it was terrible, that's still pretty good. All right. Because people are talking. But the thing is, I decided, well, maybe not. All right. So then I decided to take it further. And as soon as I got it to that stage, I said, you go any further, you're in the quagmire. All right. There's a certain level of understanding and awareness, and you take it to a certain stage. Monet was criticized for not finishing his paintings. He said, this is as far as I can take them. I firmly believe that when you get a painting to a certain stage, no matter whether it appeals to you or not, if you don't know any further to go, don't go any further. Don't go fishing, is what I'm saying to you. All right. So the criteria, you need to have a kind of a way of looking at the facts. All right. And certain conditions need to be met for something to be considered believable. This is one of the things that we, do I want my paintings to be believable? Well, they are of a certain spot, but I want them to be my interpretation of that spot. All right. So I think this is one of this blue horse that I have down there. Actually, I like that a lot. And that just was done this last week. All right. So you're going to say, how many paintings did I do this last week? I'd say 6 at least. All right. And this is the blue, call it the Blue Rider after Franz Marc and Kandinsky. But that horse, that was the only time that a horse stood for me like that. And I felt blessed. All right. But it was interesting how that was made. But you need to identify the problem and you need to understand the elements of design. And I realized that I had to paint this horse with brushstroke. All right. I had to construct it almost sculpturally with directional brushstroke. And so that's how I built the whole idea. So now we have 6 critical thinking skills you should understand. One of them is your bias. Your bias is what you make your work around. And you should know what your biases are. All right. And your ability to, analyze and things like that are important to judge. So keep in mind that I know what my biases are. All right. And biases can influence how someone understands the facts presented to them. So you have to be able to understand the perspective that you take on things. And you all have biases and you should write them down. I know that I have a bias for strong contrast. I know that I'm a formalist, all right, meaning I like light and shade. And I know I have a bias for long shadows. I also have a bias for color. I mean, these are things that I want you to recognize. And I have a bias for certain colors. So you need to be able to look at your work and understand who you are. So keep in mind that I do. So I'm going to end with this. The secret to making a painting. I started this painting. It was going nowhere. I only had them for 2 sessions, 2.5 hours each. And the first session got nowhere. Decided I got 2.5 hours. I have to make this painting. This is a big painting. Well, it's over there. It's like this size. All right. I had to put the music on. I had to put the violin music on. Once I put the violin music on, I could paint it. All right. So I just want you to understand how important it is to listen to the music. Okay, we're done. Anybody have any questions?